The cold wind howled through the dense Alaskan forest as the sun dipped below the horizon. In a small, isolated town named Frost Hollow, rumors of a predator, something beyond human comprehension, had been circulating for weeks. Livestock slaughtered, hunters vanishing without a trace, and eerie howls that sent chills down even the bravest spines. Sheriff Mike Carter leaned back in his chair at the station, staring at a map littered with red pins marking the disappearances. Across the desk sat George, a grizzled old hunter who had lived in Frost Hollow his entire life. "You think it's a bear?" Mike asked, though his voice betrayed doubt. George shook his head, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands. "A bear doesn't rip steel fences apart like paper or leave tracks that vanish into thin air." Mike sighed. "Then what is it?" George exhaled a plume of smoke. "Something ancient. Something we shouldn't be messing with." That evening, a stranger wandered into town. A man with sharp features, piercing yellow eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, and a quiet, predatory aura. He introduced himself as Conrad and claimed to be a wildlife researcher tracking dangerous animals. The townsfolk, desperate for answers, welcomed him cautiously. Conrad listened to their stories with an unsettling calm, occasionally glancing toward the forest as though he could sense something the others couldn't. "What do you think it is?" Mike asked him after a town meeting. Conrad gave a faint, chilling smile. "Wolves, perhaps, or something worse." That night, a search party set out into the forest. Mike led the group, armed with rifles and lanterns. Conrad insisted on joining, moving through the trees with uncanny ease. The forest felt alive, as if it were watching them. The air grew colder, and an unnatural silence fell. Even the usual rustle of leaves and chirping of crickets disappeared. Then, they found it. A mangled deer carcass, its flesh shredded as if by enormous claws. George knelt by the body, his face pale. "This isn't a wolf," he muttered. A low growl echoed from the darkness. The group froze, their lanterns swinging wildly as they tried to pinpoint the source. Yellow eyes flickered between the trees. "It's here," Conrad whispered, his voice almost reverent. The creature leapt from the shadows, a towering werewolf with razor-sharp fangs and claws that gleamed in the lantern light. It tore through the group with terrifying speed. George fired his rifle, the shot echoing through the forest, but the bullets barely slowed it down. Mike grabbed Conrad, yelling, "We need to run!" But Conrad didn't move. Instead, he stared at the beast with an unsettling calm, his yellow eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The werewolf lunged at Conrad, but he sidestepped effortlessly, his movements too fast for a human. Mike watched in stunned horror as Conrad's body began to shift. His muscles bulged, his skin darkened, and fur sprouted along his arms. Within moments, he had transformed into a werewolf himself. The two creatures clashed, their growls and roars reverberating through the forest. Trees splintered under the force of their blows. Conrad was faster, more calculated, while the other beast was wild and primal. The search party scattered, terrified, leaving Mike frozen in place. He watched as Conrad finally overpowered the other werewolf, sinking his fangs into its neck. The beast let out a final, anguished howl before collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Conrad returned to his human form, his face and hands smeared with blood. He turned to Mike, who stood trembling, his rifle hanging limply at his side. What are you?" Mike stammered. Conrad smirked, his yellow eyes gleaming. "I'm the one they couldn't control, and now neither could he." Without another word, Conrad disappeared into the forest, leaving behind a stunned sheriff and a town forever scarred by the nightmare they'd witnessed. In the days that followed, the townsfolk found no trace of Conrad or the other werewolf. But Mike knew better. The creature hadn't been defeated. It had merely been replaced. Some nights, as the wind howled through the trees, faint yellow eyes could still be seen in the distance, watching, waiting. The hunt was far from over.